Okay, welcome back to the third part of One Man's Faith today. We're looking at the Christmas story, and I'm giving you kind of a Christmas quiz just to see if we understand the story. And we've been talking about, it started with John the Baptist, or at least his mom and dad, and how she became pregnant and the turmoil that they went through. And then it goes to Mary, who gets visited by the angel, and what she then had to go through. Sometime either during the period that she was with Elizabeth or just after she came back, it might have been because she started to show, Joseph had to make the decision. And biblically, the Bible states that she should have been stoned. I don't mean for marijuana. Literally, physically thrown rocks at until she died, because she was betrothed, which means, as I said a little while ago, when you're betrothed, you are married, but you don't sleep together until after the ceremony of marriage. And that couple have all the rights of married couple, as far as if Joseph had died, Mary would have gotten his inheritance, okay? So it's a lot different than what we do. And because of that, if she had gotten pregnant, that means she would have slept with another man. So this is what Joseph had to deal with. And he didn't want to disgrace her. He loved her, obviously, because he wanted to put her away privately. But the Lord appeared to him, or an angel appeared to him in a dream and said, "Hey, Joe, it's all right. She's pregnant by the Holy Spirit. You marry her. You marry her." And so he doesn't put her away. Now, while she's pregnant, they have to go to Bethlehem, because in chapter 2 of Luke, it says, "In these days a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that a census was to be taken of all the inhabitants of the earth." This was the first census taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone was on their way to register for the census, each to his own city. Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the city of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem. Bethlehem, interesting, is Hebrew for the house of bread. So Joseph, as we see in the lineage, comes from David. So they had to go from Nazareth to Bethlehem to register and to be counted. So sometime after the third month, they went. They could have stayed there a while. We don't really know. All we know is they went there. There was no room in the inn, and there was no place to stay. Holiday Inn, everything else was booked solid, so they had to sleep outside, and they slept in a manger area. It says, while they were there, the days were completed for her to give birth, and she gave birth to her firstborn son, and she wrapped him in cloth and laid him in a manger. Now, the next question is this: who saw baby Jesus first, besides mom and dad? What outside people saw the baby first? It was the shepherds, because the shepherds were tending their flock close to Bethlehem. It says in chapter 2, verse 8, "In the same region there were shepherds staying out in the fields and keeping watch over their flocks by night, and an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone about them, and they were afraid. And he said, 'Don't be afraid, for behold, good news. This baby has been born,' and said, 'This is a sign for you. You will find the baby wrapped in cloth and lying in a manger.'" So Jesus is born in a manger, which is a trough for hay for the animals, because there was no place left for them to stay and to get out of the cold. Now listen, it was cold, okay? Well, I can't say that because we don't know it was cold. I'm getting out my little handy-dandy calendar here, or at least the weather, because what I want you to understand is that Uh-oh, it's not going to give it to me. Oh, yes. It is nighttime and 41 degrees in Jerusalem right now. Okay? It's winter, just like it is here. Matter of fact, let's see, it's going to go down, it's going to stay around 39 degrees tonight. But that's cold. That's cold. It's winter in Israel. And so, the reason I say that is because his birth couldn't have happened in December. That's just, for some reason, that's the time we picked. When was Jesus born? I mean, what time? Probably in the first month of their year, Nisan. The reason I say that is because that's when Passover occurs. It's interesting that Corinthians tells us, Paul says in Corinthians that he's the Passover lamb, and it was shepherds that first come to visit him, and they were out in the field. They would have been out in the field at that time because that occurs at our March, April time frame. So the first thing that happens when Jesus is born is in a sense, he is shown he is a lamb because the shepherds came to worship him. Okay? That's who first saw Jesus. Now, biblically or in the narrative, who was second? It wasn't the Magi. It was probably Simeon and Anna at the temple, because the word says in chapter 2, verse 21, and when the 8 days were passed before his circumcision, his name was then called Jesus, and the name given by the angel before he was conceived in the womb. And when the days of their purification occurred according to the law of Moses were completed, they brought him up to Jerusalem and presented him to the Lord. This was probably around the 30th day. There was a time period that when a woman had a baby, she was considered impure. And so they're taught this is the purification. They have to go and present an offering. And I think with the male child, it's also in that same time frame. They both have to go, and they're considered pure. And at this time, it says, verse 25, there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simeon, and this man was a righteous and devout, looking for the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was upon him, and it had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that he would not see death until he saw the Messiah. And he came into the Spirit, into the temple, and when the parents brought the child Jesus to carry out for him the custom of the law, then he took him into his arms and blessed God. And this is what he said. Now, Lord, you are releasing your bondservant to depart in peace according to your word. For my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared in the presence of all peoples, a light of revelation to the Gentiles. Interesting that he would say that. And the glory of your people Israel. And his father and mother were amazed at these things. And it says in verse 36, and there was a prophetess, Anna, a daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Asher, and she was advanced in years and had lived with her husband 70 years after their marriage, and then was a widow at the age of 84. She never left the temple, serving day and night with fasting and prayers. And at the very moment she came and began giving thanks to God and continued to speak to him for all those who were with the redemption of Israel. So Simeon and Anna were the next. Well, Neal, what about the Magi? Well, it could have been up to 2 years after Jesus was born. It appears they must have stayed in Israel, in Bethlehem for a while. Maybe they moved there. We don't know. We do know that later they end up going back to Nazareth. But they were there for a while. And we know that they did not see Jesus while he was in the manger. How do we know this? Okay. Where was Jesus when the shepherds saw him? We just talked about that. He was in a manger. Where was Jesus when the Magi saw him? Well, to see that, we've got to go to Matthew chapter 2. And Matthew 2 says, after hearing the king, they went on their way, and the star which they had seen in the east went on before them until it came and stood over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced greatly with great joy. After coming into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. So the shepherds saw him in the manger, but the Magi didn't see him until he was in the house. So it was a totally different time. See, this is one of the problems we have when we try and show the depiction of his birth, because even in church, we show Jesus and his Mary and mother, and then we show the shepherds coming, and right behind them, in the same manger, we have the Magi. Well, it was a lot later. Another reason we know this is because when the Magi come, they leave. Herod says, hey, guys, I want to know about this. I want to know about this king. Come back and let me know where he's at and how he's doing so I can go and worship him. And the Magi left, but God told them, hey, don't go back and tell Herod a thing. You go a different way. And when Herod found out, he called his prophets and all together, and he said, okay, when was he born? And so Herod goes and he kills all the babies 2 years and younger. So it's possible that Jesus was possibly 2 years old when the Magi came and worshiped him. Now, how many Magi were there? Oh, well, there were 3. No, not necessarily. There were at least 3. There were probably maybe 10 or 20 people in their entourage. Because the word Magi is the plural form, so we know there was more than one. But nothing tells us how many were there. We don't really know. All we know is that they brought gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. All right? Think about that for a minute. I got to take this last break, so let's take it, and I'll be right back.